Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back, way back, to a time when words truly had power. Not just the power to persuade, but the power to elevate you to dizzying heights, or to utterly, spectacularly destroy you. We're talking about ancient Rome, and specifically, the terrifying, exhilarating, utterly draining experience of being a public speaker in the Roman Forum. Forget your high school debate club or that one time you had to give a presentation at work. This is a whole different beast. Imagine standing before thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of people. Your every word scrutinized, your every gesture judged. This isn't just about delivering a speech, it's a performance, a gladiatorial contest of wits and rhetoric. And the arena is a teeming, volatile sea of humanity. You might think you felt stage fright before, trust me. You haven't felt anything like this. The stakes are your reputation, your career, your social standing, and sometimes even your very life. You're probably not going to survive this, to be honest. The pressure would make most modern folks curl up in a ball and cry for their mommy. But hey, you're a survivor. Right, you've got this. Maybe. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments below where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Always fascinating to see the global reach of our little bedtime stories. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first rays of a Roman dawn are not gentle. They stab through the narrow streets, illuminating a city already stirring with a restless energy that feels both ancient and eternally modern. But for you, this isn't just another day. Today is the day. You've been preparing for this, obsessing over it, losing countless hours of sleep to it. Today, you are to deliver a major oration from the rostra in the Roman Forum. The very thought sends a cold trickle of dread down your spine, making the meager breakfast of bread and olives stick in your throat. This isn't just a speech, it's an audition before the most demanding audience in the known world. You try to steady your breath, the air already thick with the scent of wood smoke, baking bread, and the ever-present undertone of something less pleasant, human and animal waste that lingers even after the most diligent street cleaning. Your stomach churns, a nervous butterfly migration that threatens to turn into a full-blown avian stampede. You review your notes, the carefully chosen Latin phrases, the meticulously crafted arguments designed to sway the fickle Roman populace. Every word feels weighted, every pause critical. You've rehearsed until your voice is hoarse, your gestures etched into muscle memory. But rehearsal in the quiet solitude of your study is a far cry from the roaring, unpredictable reality of the forum. The weight of history presses down on you. This is the very spot where Cicero thundered against Catiline, where Caesar delivered eulogies, where Mark Antony famously addressed the grieving populace after Caesar's assassination. You are standing on sacred ground, ground that has witnessed centuries of oratorical triumphs and ignominious failures. The ghosts of Rome's greatest speakers hover, whispering doubts in your ear. Are you worthy? Do you have the gravitas, the dignitas, the sheer rhetorical prowess to capture the attention of this demanding audience? Probably not. Your mind drifts back to your education, the brutal, relentless training that shaped aspiring orators. From an early age, you were drilled in grammar and literature, memorizing Homer and Virgil, learning the nuances of language. Then came rhetoric, the true crucible. Your teacher, a stern Roman rhetor, would mercilessly dissect your every delivery. He'd make you declaim for hours, perfecting your gestures, modulating your voice, teaching you the precise moment for a dramatic pause or a thunderous crescendo. You'd stand before your peers, reciting lengthy passages, enduring their snickers or grudging admiration. It was a constant exercise in humiliation and refinement. You remember the progymnasmata, a series of progressive exercises designed to build your oratorical muscles. You'd start with simple fables, then move to narratives, curious elaborations on a maxim or action, refutations, commonplaces, and finally, full-blown arguments. You'd practice ethos, establishing your credibility, pathos, appealing to emotions, and logos, constructing logical arguments. Every aspect of public speaking was broken down, analyzed, and perfected. It was less about expressing your thoughts and more about mastering a highly ritualized, incredibly demanding art form. You were taught to mimic the great speakers, to adopt their postures, their inflections, their very breathing patterns. It was exhausting, a constant intellectual and physical grind. And now, all that training is about to be put to the ultimate test. The thought is enough to make you consider faking a sudden, debilitating illness. Maybe a fever? No, they'd probably just wheel you out onto the roster on a litter. Romans were tough. The sheer memorization required was immense. Not only did you need to remember your speech word for word, but you also had to recall countless historical precedents, legal statutes, philosophical arguments, and poetic verses to weave into your oration spontaneously, to impress the sophisticated members of the audience. The concept of using cue cards or a teleprompter would be laughable, and frankly, insulting. True Roman orators carried it all in their minds, a vast internal library of knowledge, ready to be deployed at a moment's notice. Imagine the pressure of that. Knowing one misplaced word, one fumbled reference, could undermine your entire argument and expose you as a fraud. It's enough to give you chronic indigestion, a common ailment among aspiring Roman public speakers. Maybe the constant vomiting wasn't just a sign of illness, but chronic anxiety. The Romans also placed immense importance on delivery. It wasn't enough to have brilliant ideas. You had to present them with actio, a combination of voice, gesture, and facial expression. You practiced elaborate hand movements, learning which gesture conveyed indignation, which suggested agreement, which highlighted a rhetorical question. Your voice had to be powerful enough to carry across the vast forum, yet capable of subtle modulation for emphasis or pathos. You couldn't just mumble, you had to project, to bellow, to whisper, to command. Your face, too, was a tool, trained to convey a spectrum of emotions without appearing overly theatrical. It was a constant tightrope walk between authenticity and performance. No wonder they had acting schools for orators. Seriously. They did. Beyond the formal training, there was the informal education of simply being Roman. You grew up surrounded by public discourse. You witnessed orators in the forum from a young age, observed their techniques, absorbed the rhythm of public debate. You understood the nuances of Roman crowds, the subtle shifts in their mood, the indicators of their approval or disapproval. This wasn't something taught in a classroom. It was learned through immersion, through the very air you breathed in Rome. You dressed meticulously for the occasion. Your toga, painstakingly draped, is spotless and perfectly white, a symbol of your senatorial or equestrian rank and your moral purity. Any stain, any imperfection, would be noticed and interpreted as a flaw in your character. Your hair is neatly combed, your face clean-shaven if you follow the current fashion. Every detail of your appearance is calculated to convey dignity and seriousness. This isn't just personal vanity, it's part of the rhetorical arsenal. A visual argument for your credibility before you even open your mouth. You want to appear composed, confident, utterly in command? Deep down, you're a trembling mess. But even as you focus on your own performance, your senses are assaulted by the city around you. The relentless clamor of the Roman streets, the incessant chatter, the shouts of vendors, the creak of carts, the distant bleating of sheep being driven to market. It's an overwhelming symphony of urban life. And beneath it all, the omnipresent odors of Rome, roasting meat, stale wine, human perspiration, and the ever-present acrid tang of garbage and waste. It's a sensory assault that you must learn to filter out, to rise above, if your voice is to be heard and your message understood. The fact that any orator managed to be heard at all over this din is a testament to their powerful lungs and formidable projection skills. I mean, you try talking over 1,000 people shouting at the same time while someone's trying to sell you a live chicken. And as you finally make your way towards the forum, the crowds begin to thicken. People jostle past you, their faces a mixture of expectation, indifference, and sometimes outright hostility. You know that among them are your supporters, but also your rivals, ready to heckle, to interrupt, to undermine your arguments with shouts and catcalls. This isn't a polite audience, it's a living, breathing, unpredictable entity capable of turning on a dime. The walk to the rostra feels like a march to the gallows. You've made it to the edge of the Roman Forum, the heart of the ancient world, and the sheer sensory overload threatens to drown you before you even reach the rostra. This isn't the tranquil, ruined forum you see in pictures today. This is a living, breathing, roaring beast, and every one of your senses is about to be assaulted in the most Roman way possible. First, the smell. It hits you like a physical wall, a complex, overwhelming bouquet of aromas that would make even the most seasoned modern nose recoil. There's the sharp, acrid tang of urine and animal waste from the countless people and beasts that traverse the forum daily, often with little regard for public sanitation. This mingles with the cloying sweetness of decaying organic matter, dropped food, discarded fruit, and who knows what else slowly fermenting in the Roman sun. Overlaying this is the pervasive scent of human sweat, unwashed bodies, and the rich, earthy smell of the unpaved ground, churned by thousands of sandals. Then cut through by the sharp, metallic tang of copper coins, the smoky scent of charcoal braziers from street vendors, and the occasional whiff of roasting meat. It's an assault of pungency, a constant reminder that hygiene was a luxury few could afford, and public spaces were, quite literally, public latrines for many. You try to take shallow breaths, but the stench still manages to cling to the back of your throat. Then comes the sound. It's not just loud, it's a cacophony, a relentless symphony of human and animal noise. The shouts of vendors hawking their wares. Fresh bread, olives, fish sauce. Compete with the braying of donkeys pulling carts, the distant clanging of hammers from construction sites, and the incessant chatter of thousands of people conducting business, arguing, gossiping, and simply existing. There's the rhythmic thud of feet on stone, the occasional crash of something breaking, and the piercing cry of a street urchin. Above all, the constant murmur of a crowd, a low, guttural roar that can swell into a deafening clamor at a moment's notice. You try to focus on the carefully prepared speech in your mind, but the external noise relentlessly batters against your thoughts, making concentration a heroic effort. How anyone managed to hear a full speech over this din is a mystery, a testament to both their powerful voices and the Roman crowd's ability to focus, or perhaps just their willingness to endure the noise. It's like trying to give a TED Talk in the middle of a perpetual rock concert. If the band was made up of angry goats and very loud fishmongers, and then the sight. The forum is a chaotic tapestry of human activity. Throngs of people are everywhere. Citizens in their togas, slaves in their tunics, merchants, soldiers, beggars, philosophers, and common laborers. They jostle, push, and weave through the narrow pathways between the grand temples, basilicas, and monuments. The light glares off the white marble of the larger buildings, momentarily blinding you, then plunges you into the shadows of crowded porticos. Your eyes dart, trying to take everything in, to anticipate any sudden movements, any potential disruptions. You see street performers, jugglers, maybe even a small fight breaking out in the distance. The vibrant colors of draped fabrics, painted murals, and even the occasional brightly dressed individual add to the visual overload. It's a dynamic, ever-shifting landscape, almost impossible to fully comprehend. The sheer density of the crowd is a physical challenge. You are constantly being pushed and jostled, your personal space a concept utterly alien to the Roman Forum. Strangers brush against you, their sweat-soaked tunics making contact. You try to maintain an air of dignity, but it's hard when you're being shoved by a farmer trying to get to the market and nearly tripping over a sleeping dog. The physical press of humanity is a constant reminder of how exposed you are, how little control you have over your immediate surroundings. This is not a polite, orderly gathering. It's a human river, swirling and eddying with unpredictable currents. And let's not forget the heat. Even if it's not the height of summer, the Roman sun can be merciless. Dressed in your thick wool toga, designed more for dignified appearance than comfort, you feel the sweat begin to prickle on your skin. The heat rises from the stone paving, from the densely packed bodies, creating a stifling, oppressive atmosphere. Dehydration is a real threat. Your mouth feels dry, your throat scratchy. A terrible omen for someone about to deliver a lengthy, impassioned speech. You try to swallow, but your throat feels like sandpaper. Amidst this sensory chaos, you are expected to project an image of calm, authority, and intellectual superiority. You're supposed to embody gravitas, a sense of seriousness and moral weight. But how do you maintain gravitas when you're sticky with a sweat, surrounded by 1,000 smells, deafened by noise, and constantly being elbowed by strangers? It's a performance of epic proportions, not just of words, but of sheer physical and mental endurance. One common historical detail about the Forum is the presence of circulatores, or street hawkers, and even prostitutes, who would mingle with the crowds, adding to the general chaos and often distracting from any serious discourse. Imagine trying to deliver a crucial political speech while someone nearby is yelling about the price of olives, or another is trying to proposition a passerby. This wasn't a quiet lecture hall, it was a vibrant, messy, unedited slice of Roman life. And your speech was just one small element of its daily drama. A lesser-known aspect of the Forum's atmosphere was the constant presence of animals. Not just the occasional donkey cart, but stray dogs, pigeons, and even sacrificial animals being led to nearby temples. The sounds, smells, and visual distractions from these creatures would add another layer of unpredictability to your already challenging environment. Picture yourself building to a rhetorical crescendo, only to have a goat bleat loudly at the most inopportune moment. It's enough to make a modern speaker want to retire to a padded room. Historians still debate the true acoustics of the Roman Forum. Some argue that the open space, combined with the sheer volume of Roman orators, meant that only the most powerful voices could truly carry. Others contend that the dense crowds and the way sound bounced off the surrounding buildings created a surprisingly effective, if chaotic, echo chamber. The academic discussion often revolves around how much direct amplification, like an orator standing on a raised platform, was truly effective versus how much relied on the sheer lung power and vocal training of the individual speaker. Regardless, it was a physically demanding feat to make oneself heard and understood by thousands without any mechanical aid. So, as you finally approach the base of the rostra, feeling the rough texture of the ancient stone beneath your worn sandals, you take one last deep, fortifying breath. The air is thick, the noise is deafening, and the crowd is a restless, unpredictable sea. This is the stage. This is your moment. And this is going to be absolutely, terribly, undeniably Roman. You wonder if you'll ever truly breathe easily again. You stand at the foot of the rostra, the very platform where Roman history has been shaped by the power of the spoken word. The cacophony of the Forum swells around you, threatening to engulf your resolve. But before you can even begin to ascend, your mind is flooded with memories of the grueling, often humiliating, journey that brought you to this terrifying precipice, the rigorous gauntlet of rhetorical training. This wasn't simply learning to speak, it was a brutal apprenticeship, designed to break you down and rebuild you as an instrument of persuasion. From your earliest years, Roman education, particularly for a boy of your social standing, was geared towards this moment. While modern schools might prioritize a broad curriculum, yours was relentlessly focused on rhetoric. You began with the ludus literarius, learning basic literacy, reading the great poets and historians, but the true agony began with the grammaticus, where you delved into grammar, syntax, and literary analysis. You didn't just read Virgil, you dissected him, memorized lengthy passages, analyzed his use of metaphors and similes, and learned to emulate his style. This wasn't for appreciation, it was for appropriation. Every line was a lesson in how to craft powerful language. But the real torment, the true crucible, was the reader. This was your master, often a Greek slave or freedman, who held absolute sway over your oratorical development. He was a taskmaster, demanding perfection, offering little praise, and quick to point out every flaw. Imagine standing before him, reciting a speech you'd painstakingly prepared, only for him to interrupt with a sneer, dissecting your every gesture, correcting your pronunciation, tearing apart your carefully constructed arguments. Your voice lacks resonance. Your hand gesture contradicts your words. This argument is flabby, like an unexercised body. The critiques were relentless, often public, and always designed to expose your weaknesses. It was less about nurturing talent and more about forging resilience through trial by fire. You often felt like a piece of clay, constantly molded, kneaded, and then smashed apart to be reshaped. The core of this training involved the progymnasmata, a structured series of exercises that built rhetorical skills incrementally. You started simple retelling fables, learning to narrate clearly and concisely. Then came narratives, expanding on historical events or myths, focusing on vivid description and chronological order. Next were creas, elaborating on a famous saying or action, forcing you to develop an argument around a single point. You'd move on to refutations and confirmations, learning to argue both for and against a given proposition, teaching you to see both sides of an issue and anticipate counter-arguments. Then, commonplaces, where you'd expand on a general topic, like the evils of tyranny or the virtues of justice. Each exercise built upon the last, systematically developing your argumentative muscles. The sheer memorization required was immense. Not only did you have to commit your own speeches to memory, and these weren't short, 10-minute talks. They could last for hours. But you also had to internalize a vast repository of classical literature, historical anecdotes, legal precedents, and philosophical maxims. You needed to be able to recall these at a moment's notice, weaving them seamlessly into your impromptu responses or using them to buttress your prepared arguments. There were no teleprompters, no notes allowed on the roster itself. Your mind was your only tool, and it had to be a perfectly honed, encyclopedic library. The fear of a mental blank, a sudden lapse in memory during a crucial moment, was a constant terror. It's enough to make you wish you just decided to be a farmer instead. A quiet, anonymous farmer, beyond the content. The delivery actio was paramount. Your reader would relentlessly drill you on your voice, gestures, and facial expressions. Your voice needed to be powerful, capable of carrying over the clamor of the forum, yet also nuanced enough for subtle emphasis. You practiced modulating your tone, achieving thunderous indignation one moment, a plaintive whisper the next. Your gestures were equally vital. Every movement of your hands and arms was prescribed how to point, how to plead, how to express outrage, how to invite agreement. It was like learning a complex dance where every step and sweep of the arm had specific meaning. Your facial expressions were also trained, conveying sincerity, anger, sorrow, or conviction without appearing overtly theatrical. A fine line you constantly walked. You'd practice in front of a mirror or a harsh rhetor until these movements became second nature, flowing effortlessly with your words. One common pedagogical tool was the declamatio, which involved practicing speeches on fictitious legal cases or historical dilemmas. These were often wildly dramatic and exaggerated scenarios, pushing students to explore the full range of rhetorical techniques. Imagine arguing the case for Orestes after he murders his mother, or debating whether Alexander the Great should have sailed the ocean. It was a form of intellectual theater, designed to stretch your abilities, but also to instill a sense of the gravity and potential drama of public life. This rigorous training was not just about intellectual mastery, it was about building endurance, physical, mental, and emotional. You learn to stand for hours, projecting your voice, maintaining your composure under intense scrutiny. You learn to ignore distractions, to control your nerves, and to channel your fear into energy. It was a testament to the Roman belief that true mastery came only through relentless discipline and suffering. It made public speaking less of a career choice and more of a brutal, gladiatorial sport. A curious and frankly quite terrifying. Historical detail is that some Roman orators would practice with pebbles in their mouths to improve articulation, or speak while running uphill to build lung capacity. Imagine doing wind sprints while trying to articulate complex Latin sentences. The dedication, or perhaps the masochism, was truly extraordinary. Historians still debate the extent to which these formal rhetorical exercises truly prepared students for the unpredictable realities of the Roman Forum. Some argue that the highly stylized declamatio could lead to an overly theatrical or artificial style that might not resonate with a cynical Roman crowd. Others contend that the sheer discipline instilled by this training provided the foundational skills necessary to adapt and thrive in such a demanding environment. The academic discussion often revolves around the tension between formalized education and practical application, a timeless debate that transcends the Roman era. So, as you take those first trembling steps towards the rostra, the echoes of your rhetor's harsh criticisms ring in your ears. You recall the endless hours of practice, the scraped knees of humiliation, the burning desire for perfection. All of it, every agonizing moment, has led you to this very spot. And now you must prove that all that suffering was not in vain. The forum awaits, and it shows no mercy to the unprepared or the faint of heart. You've endured the arduous training, absorbed the forum's oppressive atmosphere, and now, as you prepare to ascend the rostra, your attention turns to one crucial, non-verbal aspect of your presentation, your toga. In ancient Rome, your attire wasn't just clothing, it was a carefully constructed statement, a vital component of your public persona that spoke volumes before you uttered a single word. Fashioning this public persona was an art in itself, and a single misstep could undermine your entire rhetorical effort. Imagine the meticulous care taken in preparing your toga. This isn't some hastily thrown on bedsheet. It's a massive, semicircular piece of white woolen fabric, often weighing several pounds, draped and folded in a specific, intricate manner. For an orator, the toga virilis, the plain white toga of manhood, was essential. It signified your citizenship, your maturity, and your right to participate in public life. Any stain, any wrinkle, any imperfect fold would immediately draw negative attention and subtly discredit you in the eyes of the discerning Roman public. It conveyed slovenliness, a lack of attention to detail, perhaps even moral laxity. You want to present an image of pristine purity, of untarnished dignitas. The color of your toga was also critical. For most public occasions, it was a brilliant bleached white, achieved through painstaking processes involving fullers who would clean, whiten, and press the wool. This dazzling white symbolized your integrity and your standing as a Roman citizen. A politician or an orator would ensure their toga was as immaculate as possible, signaling their virtue and trustworthiness. Imagine standing there, the sun glinting off the stark white fabric, hoping it conveys an aura of unimpeachable honesty, even if you've just bribed half the Senate. Beyond the color, the draping was an art form. The toga wasn't sewn, it was wrapped and folded. The right arm was often left free for gestures, while the left arm and shoulder were enveloped in voluminous folds. A portion might be drawn up over the head as a hood for religious ceremonies or to indicate mourning. But for an oration, it was typically worn in a formal, structured manner that allowed for grand, sweeping gestures. Achieving this perfect drape required practice, and often the assistance of a slave or servant. A poorly draped toga could impede your movements, trip you up, or simply make you look clumsy and unprofessional. It was a physical constraint that you had to master. Turning it from a hindrance into an extension of your rhetorical performance Your physical appearance beneath the toga was equally scrutinized. While Romans weren't obsessed with overt muscularity in the same way modern culture is, a healthy, well-maintained physique was seen as indicative of a disciplined mind. You couldn't be too thin, suggesting weakness, nor too corpulent, implying laziness or gluttony. Your hair was typically short and neatly combed. Your face clean-shaven, though beards would come into fashion later, particularly during the time of the emperors like Hadrian, often associated with Greek philosophy. Any sign of disheveledness, poor hygiene, or excessive indulgence could immediately undermine your message. Remember, in Rome, appearance was reality, at least publicly. The shoes you wore were also part of this carefully constructed image. For a man of your standing, simple, well-made sandals, calcae or soli, or enclosed shoes, calcae, would be appropriate. They would be clean, polished, and sturdy, reflecting your status without being ostentatious. Footwear that was too worn or too luxurious could send the wrong message to the diverse crowd observing your every move. Every detail was a cue, a subtle signal to your audience. This obsession with appearance wasn't mere vanity. It was deeply rooted in Roman social values. The concept of decorum was paramount, acting and appearing in a manner appropriate to your station and the situation. To fail in your presentation was to fail in decorum, which reflected poorly not just on you, but on your family and your social class. Your toga and your grooming were physical manifestations of your adherence to Roman ideals, a silent argument for your virtue and reliability. It's like trying to get a job as a CEO while wearing a stained t-shirt and flip-flops. It just doesn't fly. One fascinating detail there were specific laws, or at least strong social conventions, about who could wear a toga and under what circumstances. It was the garment of the Roman citizen, non-citizens, slaves, and foreigners typically wore simpler tunics or other garments. This exclusivity added to the toga's symbolic power as a statement of your privileged status, reminding everyone in the forum that you were one of the chosen few with the right to address the Roman people. A lesser-known fact is that some Roman orators might even subtly use perfumes or unguents to create a more pleasant sensory experience for those close enough to detect it, hoping to subtly influence their perception. While not a primary rhetorical tool, it speaks to the holistic nature of their public presentation. Imagine trying to subtly dab on a bit of rose oil while preparing to deliver a fiery condemnation of a political opponent. It's a fine line between smelling distinguished and smelling like you're trying too hard. The meticulousness required in presentation often led to a form of fashion anxiety that modern public speakers might recognize. The fear of a sudden rip in your toga, a splash of mud on your carefully whitened fabric, or a stray hair falling out of place could trigger a momentary panic. These seemingly minor details could become major distractions, undermining your confidence and the audience's perception of your authority. The academic debate often revolves around the true extent to which physical appearance influenced the reception of a speech versus the inherent power of the rhetorical arguments themselves. While we may emphasize content today, in ancient Rome, the two were inextricably linked. So, as your servant makes one final adjustment to the folds of your pristine toga, you feel the familiar weight of the fabric, a reassuring yet restricting embrace. You take a deep breath, trying to calm your racing heart. Your appearance is perfect, a silent orator in itself, already making its case to the throng. Now it's up to your voice, your words, and your will to conquer the stage that awaits. The forum's eyes are upon you, judging not just what you say, but how you present yourself. A total package of Roman dignitas or disastrous failure. You've meticulously prepared your appearance, your toga flawlessly draped, a silent promise of your dignitas. You've ascended the rostra, feeling the ancient stone beneath your polished sandals, the weight of history and expectation pressing down. But now, as you stand before the restless, roaring Roman populace, the real battle begins the physical and physiological demands of delivering a lengthy, high-stakes address. This isn't just a test of your intellect, it's an extreme endurance sport. a relentless assault on your body and mind. First, consider the sheer volume required. There are no microphones, no amplification systems. Your voice, your lungs, are your only tools to reach the thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, crammed into the forum. You must project, not just speak loudly, but fill the vast open space with your voice, making every syllable clear and understandable amidst the clamor. This demands incredible lung capacity and vocal control. You've practiced for hours, bellowing passages, modulating your tone, but now, in the unforgiving reality of the forum, your throat already feels dry, your vocal cords strained. Imagine trying to shout your entire doctoral thesis across a football stadium without stopping for hours. It's an insane demand on your body. The duration of these speeches was also staggering. A major oration wasn't a quick 10-minute address. It could last for several hours, sometimes even a full day if it was part of a legal trial or a heated political debate. Think about that standing upright, maintaining perfect posture, projecting your voice, and performing elaborate gestures, all while keeping your arguments coherent and your audience engaged. For what feels like an eternity, your legs begin to ache, your back stiffens, and your arm, perpetually extended in a rhetorical gesture, starts to cramp. You can feel the sweat trickling down your back, beneath the heavy wool of your toga. Your mouth becomes a desert, your tongue thick. Then there's the relentless Roman sun. Even if it's not the dog days of August, the forum is an open-air amphitheater, and the sun beats down mercilessly on the orator standing exposed on the rostra. The heat, combined with the exertion of continuous speaking, quickly leads to dehydration. Your throat gets scratchy, your voice hoarse, and your vision might even start to blur around the edges. There's no water bottle conveniently placed beside you, you simply endure. The Roman orator was often a master of self-denial and physical resilience. You just keep talking, forcing the words out, even as your body protests. And let's not forget the constant nervous energy. The adrenaline coursing through your veins is a double-edged sword. It can give you power and focus, but it can also lead to trembling hands, a quavering voice, and a racing heart. The physical manifestations of anxiety are magnified under the intense scrutiny of the crowd. You might feel your stomach clench, or a sudden urge to clear your throat, battling your own body's rebellion while simultaneously trying to sway public opinion. It's a miracle anyone managed to speak at all without spontaneously combusting from internal pressure. The gestures, which look so elegant and controlled in practice, now feel cumbersome and tiring. You must ensure your hand movements are precise and impactful, not wild and uncontrolled. Every dramatic sweep of the arm, every pointed finger, requires energy and muscle control. Your body is a finely tuned instrument, and it must maintain its performance even as fatigue sets in. This is not casual speaking. This is a highly choreographed physical display of conviction. One common physiological challenge was maintaining composure in the face of interruptions. As we'll discuss later, the Roman crowd was not passive. They would heckle, shout, cheer, and sometimes even throw things. You had to maintain your physical stance, your vocal projection, and your mental focus, even as a wave of derision or applause swept over you. This required immense self-control, a stoic indifference to external chaos, even as your internal world was a maelstrom of fear and exhaustion. A fascinating, though often overlooked aspect of Roman public speaking was the practice of vociferatio, essentially yelling at the top of your lungs. While perhaps not a formal rhetorical term, it captures the raw, unrestrained power that Roman orators had to muster to be heard. They would not just speak, they would often bellow, their voices cracking with emotion and effort. This was an accepted, even expected part of powerful delivery, but it took a brutal toll on the vocal cords. Imagine the chronic laryngitis or strained voices that must have been rampant among successful Roman speakers. A lesser-known fact is that some Roman orators would use phonasi, vocal trainers or coaches, who would travel with them and help them conserve their voices or recover after strenuous speeches. These trainers might prescribe specific exercises, dietary regimens, or even remedies for hoarseness, highlighting the recognition that the orator's voice was a precious, fragile instrument. It wasn't just about sounding good, it was about preventing total vocal collapse during a critical debate. The academic discussion still grapples with the actual effective range of an orator's voice in the Roman Forum. Given the size of the space and the ambient noise, some historians argue that only those in the immediate vicinity of the rostra could truly hear every word, suggesting that much of the impact came from the orator's visual presence, their gestures, and the general emotional tenor of the performance, rather than the intricate details of their arguments. Others maintain that the Romans had highly developed vocal projection techniques that allowed for remarkably widespread intelligibility. This ongoing debate highlights the difficulty of reconstructing the full sensory experience of the past. So, as your voice begins to crack and your throat burns, you push through the mounting physical discomfort. You draw on every ounce of your training, every memory of your rhetor's harsh commands. This isn't just about delivering words, it's about a feat of physical and mental endurance, a testament to the raw, unamplified power of the human voice, pushed to its absolute limits under the unforgiving gaze of the Roman world. You are a gladiator of rhetoric, and your body is the arena. You've mastered the physical demands, the searing sun, and the relentless exertion. Your voice, though strained, still carries. Your gestures, though weary, remain precise. But now, as you truly begin to articulate your arguments, you face the most formidable and unpredictable element of your oratorical challenge, the roar of the crowd. This isn't a passive audience, it's a fickle, often hostile Roman mob, whose collective reaction can elevate you to unparalleled heights or utterly crush your career in a single, devastating moment. The Roman crowd was a living, breathing entity, a collective consciousness with its own moods, prejudices, and unpredictable whims. They weren't there just to listen. They were there to participate, to judge, to be entertained, and sometimes to simply vent their frustrations. One moment, a perfectly timed rhetorical flourish might elicit a wave of thunderous applause and shouts of "Bene, bene, good, good." The next, a slight misstep, a poorly chosen word, or simply a shift in the collective mood, could be met with a cascade of hisses, groans, or even outright jeers of "male, male." Bad, bad. This immediate visceral feedback was both exhilarating and terrifying. You feel a surge of power when they roar their approval, but a cold dread when their mood turns sour. Managing this crowd requires an almost superhuman sensitivity. You must constantly read their faces, gauge their energy, and adapt your delivery on the fly. Are they bored? Speed up? Are they angry? Temper your tone? Are they receptive? Drive your point home with greater force. This improvisation, this dance with an unpredictable beast, is where true oratorical genius lies, and where most aspiring speakers fail spectacularly. You can have the most brilliant arguments, but if you lose the crowd, you have nothing. Heckling was not just common, it was an accepted part of the forum's discourse. Your political rivals, disguised within the crowd or strategically placed, would shout interruptions, spread rumors, or even try to incite a negative reaction. Imagine being in the middle of a complex legal argument, only to have someone bellow, "Liar, he bribed the jury," from the back of the crowd. You couldn't ignore it, you had to address it, to swiftly refute the accusation without losing your train of thought or your dignity. This required incredible quick wit and mental agility, often turning a hostile interjection into an opportunity to showcase your rhetorical prowess. It's like trying to play chess while people are throwing rotten fruit at you. Beyond mere heckling, the crowd could express its displeasure in more physical ways. While rarely lethal, the occasional thrown vegetable or piece of fruit was not unheard of, especially if you were particularly unpopular or perceived as arrogant. Imagine dodging a rotten apple while trying to deliver a powerful peroration. It's a constant reminder of the physical proximity and raw power of the masses you are trying to sway. The emotional manipulation of the crowd was a key aspect of Roman rhetoric. Orators were masters of pathos, appealing to the audience's emotions. their patriotism, their anger, their fear, their compassion. You might recount a tragic story, paint a vivid picture of injustice, or appeal to their sense of Roman glory. The goal was to ignite their passions, to make them feel what you wanted them to feel, thereby overriding their critical faculties. This was a dangerous game. Emotions could be fickle, and a crowd roused to passion could turn on you just as easily as they could cheer for you. A particularly fascinating aspect of the Roman crowd was its collective memory. They remembered past speeches, past promises, past betrayals. You couldn't simply invent facts or contradict your previous statements without consequence. There would be shouts of hypocrite or reminders of your past inconsistencies. This meant that every word you uttered in the forum contributed to your public reputation, building a personal history of credibility or deceit that the crowd would never forget. One common historical truth is that the Roman mob was highly susceptible to demagoguery. Orators who appealed directly to their baser instincts, who promised impossible solutions, or who skillfully exploited their grievances could often gain massive, albeit temporary, popularity. This made it a challenging environment for genuine, reasoned debate, as logical arguments could easily be drowned out by appeals to raw emotion or popular prejudice. A lesser-known detail about the crowd's behavior is their use of PDs, which literally means feet. This referred to the stomping of feet to indicate applause or approval, creating a thunderous, rhythmic sound that would reverberate through the forum. Conversely, a quiet or silent reception, or even a slow, deliberate stomp, could indicate disapproval or utter indifference, a fate perhaps worse than outright hostility for an orator. So, the ground beneath your feet could literally shake with the crowd's judgment. Historians continue to debate the true political influence of the Roman mob. Some argue that while they were a powerful force in public gatherings, their actual impact on policy and legislation was limited, largely serving as a barometer of popular sentiment rather than a direct decision-making body. Others contend that the fear of mob violence or popular unrest significantly constrained the actions of the Senate and magistrates. The academic discussion often revolves around the tension between the theoretical power of the Roman people and the practical realities of political maneuvering and elite control. So, as the crescendo of your voice reaches its peak, and you pause, holding your breath, waiting for the crowd's reaction, you feel the raw power of their collective will. Their roar, whether of approval or scorn, is the ultimate judge, the final arbiter of your fate. This isn't just about winning an argument. It's about conquering the hearts and minds of Rome, one unpredictable, terrifying roar at a time. And you know, deep down, that you are merely a puppet on strings, dancing to the tune of 1,000 shifting moods. You've survived the physical ordeal, navigated the treacherous waters of the Roman crowd, and kept your rhetorical ship afloat. But as you continue your oration from the rostra, another layer of challenge emerges, the constant sights of spectacle and sounds of scorn. The forum is not a sterile speaking venue. It's a vibrant, chaotic marketplace of ideas, goods, and distractions. And your rivals are always ready to exploit these elements to undermine your every word. Imagine trying to maintain your focus, your carefully crafted arguments, while a dozen different distractions vie for your audience's attention. A street performer might suddenly start juggling apples just off to your left, their movements drawing eyes away from your dignified pronouncements. A vendor might loudly hawk their wares, their booming voice cutting through your carefully modulated tones. Perhaps a group of rowdy young men, bored or paid by a rival, starts a loud argument, designed to disrupt the flow of your speech and make it impossible for those further back to hear you. It's an arena where your control over the environment is minimal, and chaos is the default setting. Then there are the visual distractions within the forum itself. Your eyes might inadvertently dart to a group of influential senators whispering intently, wondering if they are discussing your performance. Or perhaps you catch sight of a gladiator poster being unfurled on a nearby wall, promising a brutal spectacle that will inevitably steal some attention. The sheer architectural grandeur of the forum, with its towering temples, triumphal arches, and intricate statues, is beautiful but also constantly vying for the visual focus of your audience. Every element of the forum is a potential competitor for the attention you desperately need. Your rivals aren't above using these distractions, or even creating them. They might strategically place loud, disruptive individuals in the crowd, often paid to shout insults or irrelevant questions. They might arrange for animals to be driven through the forum at a critical moment in your speech, hoping to cause a commotion. There were no rules of decorum that prevented such tactics. It was all part of the cutthroat game of Roman politics and law. It's like trying to give a serious presentation in a circus. While your competitors are running around with air horns and confetti cannons, the sound of scorn is perhaps the most insidious. It's not just outright heckling, but the collective murmuring, the slow hand claps of disapproval, the subtle jeers that ripple through sections of the crowd. You can feel it, a chilling wave of negativity that washes over you, threatening to undermine your confidence. It's a constant battle against this psychological warfare, trying to project an image of unwavering conviction even as you feel the tide turning against you. Body language from the crowd also plays a huge role. You might see people turning their backs to you, a clear sign of contempt. Others might ostentatiously yawn or engage in private conversations, signaling their disinterest. These aren't just individual reactions. They can be contagious, spreading rapidly through the crowd and leading to a mass disengagement that is almost impossible to recover from. You're constantly scanning, constantly reacting, trying to win back attention, trying to re-engage those wandering eyes and minds. A particularly cruel tactic employed by rivals was the use of clappers or claqueurs. These were paid individuals specifically hired to applaud or boo at designated moments, to create a false impression of widespread approval or disapproval. Imagine delivering a particularly moving passage only for a coordinated wave of boos to erupt from a section of the crowd, designed to undermine your emotional appeal. Or, conversely, watching a rival's mediocre speech receive thunderous but clearly artificial applause. This manufactured public opinion made it even harder to gauge genuine audience sentiment and could profoundly affect the morale of the speaker. One common historical fact is that Roman orators, particularly in legal cases, often had to contend with the presence of advocati, legal assistants or friends of the opposing party, who would sometimes try to interrupt or badger the speaker. This wasn't just informal heckling. It was a semi-formal attempt to throw off your rhythm and undermine your arguments, demanding a quick and sharp retort if you weren't to be seen as weak. A lesser-known detail is the sheer physical proximity of the audience. The rostra was raised, but not so high that you were entirely separate from the crowd. You could see the individual faces, the sneers, the bored expressions. This intimate yet hostile proximity added another layer of pressure, making it feel less like speaking to a faceless mob and more like performing for 1,000 individual judgmental critics, all within spitting distance. Historians still debate the true extent to which such distractions and deliberate sabotage affected the outcome of major speeches or legal cases. While some argue that skilled orators could always rise above the din, others contend that the chaotic environment of the forum inherently favored those with more resources to deploy distractions or manipulate the crowd, suggesting that fair play was a luxury rarely afforded in Roman public discourse. The academic discussion often highlights the raw, brutal nature of Roman public life, where rhetoric was less about noble persuasion and more about a bare-knuckle brawl for influence. So, as a distant dog barks relentlessly, and a group of young men erupts in laughter near the temple of Saturn, you take a deep breath, you push through the noise, you ignore the taunts, and you force your gaze to meet the eyes of the indifferent and the hostile alike. This is the Roman Forum, a coliseum of words, and every moment is a test of your resolve against the relentless tide of distraction and scorn. You are a lone figure against a sea of chaos, and your only weapon is your voice. You've battled the forum's sensory onslaught, the crowd's fickle moods, and your rival's cunning distractions. You've poured your training and your very essence into your words. But even as you deliver your most powerful arguments, an insidious, invisible force hovers over you, capable of ending your career, your social standing, and even your life the shadow of the censor. This isn't just about public opinion. It's about the ever-present threat of official disapproval, of being deemed unworthy, or of uttering a phrase that could lead to your political, social, and even physical ruin. In ancient Rome, the censor was a powerful magistrate, elected every 5 years. While their most famous role was conducting the census, they also held immense moral authority, overseeing public morals cura morum, and could inflict severe penalties for behavior deemed unethical, un-Roman, or simply unbecoming of one's station. This included matters of speech. If your oration was deemed seditious, excessively vulgar, disrespectful to the gods, or even just poorly delivered in a way that shamed your family, the censors could act. The censor's power was absolute and largely unchecked. They could publicly reprimand you note e censoria, remove you from the Senate if you were a senator, strip you of your equestrian rank if you were an eques, or even disenfranchise you, taking away your right to vote and hold office. Imagine years of tireless work, endless study, and political maneuvering, all wiped away in an instant because a censor decided your peroration was too offensive or your satire too sharp. This wasn't a legal trial, it was a moral judgment, and there was little recourse, and the censor's word was, for all intents and purposes, law in this specific domain. This constant threat forced orators to tread a very fine line. You had to be bold enough to persuade, passionate enough to inspire, and clever enough to outmaneuver your opponents. But you also had to remain within the unwritten, yet strictly enforced boundaries of Roman decency and tradition. A well-placed joke could win over the crowd, but a crude one could earn the censor's wrath. A fiery condemnation of a rival could be effective, but an attack on the sanctity of Roman institutions or the very fabric of Roman society was a dangerous gamble. It was like walking a tightrope over a pit of crocodiles, while simultaneously trying to deliver a Shakespearean soliloquy. The censor's gaze wasn't just on the content of your words, but also on your delivery and demeanor. An orator who was perceived as too theatrical, too effeminate, or lacking an appropriate gravitas could also fall under censure. The way you stood, the gestures you made, the very tone of your voice, all were scrutinized for their adherence to Roman ideals of manliness and civic responsibility. It was a holistic judgment, where your performance was intrinsically linked to your moral standing. Even without the direct intervention of a censor, the fear of censure was a powerful deterrent. It instilled a sense of self-censorship, forcing you to carefully weigh every phrase, every argument, every emotional appeal. You knew that your words would not just be heard by the crowd, but potentially by the stern, unyielding eyes of Rome's moral guardians. This constant awareness added an immense layer of psychological pressure to an already demanding performance. Beyond the censor, there was also the potential for legal repercussions. Seditious speech, incitement to violence, or blatant slander could lead to charges and trials. While the censor's judgment was swift and non-judicial, a court case was a longer, equally devastating ordeal. This meant that while you needed to be forceful and persuasive, you also had to be legally impeccable, crafting arguments that were both compelling and defensible. The line between passionate rhetoric and actionable offense was dangerously thin. A common historical truth is that the office of censor was often held by former consuls, men of immense experience and prestige. This meant that the moral judgment came from the very pinnacle of Roman society, lending it undeniable weight and authority. They weren't just bureaucrats, they were the living embodiment of Roman tradition and virtue, making their disapproval all the more potent. A lesser-known detail is that the censors, in addition to their more formal duties, could also intervene in matters of everyday public life, such as regulating excessive luxury or enforcing sumptuary laws. This extended reach meant that their gaze was truly omnipresent, subtly influencing everything from what you wore to how you spoke. Their power was not just reactive, it was a constant, preventative force shaping Roman societal norms. It's like having a hyper-vigilant HOA that can actually banish you from the neighborhood Historians still debate the true impact of censorship on the creativity and daring of Roman orators. Some argue that the fear of censure stifled genuine dissent and forced speakers into more conventional, less innovative rhetorical styles. Others contend that it pushed orators to be more skillful and nuanced, learning to convey challenging ideas through subtle implication, irony, and rhetorical sleight of hand, rather than blunt force. The academic discussion often explores how constraints, paradoxically, can sometimes foster greater artistry and intellectual cunning, as speakers found ways to push boundaries without explicitly crossing them. So, as you deliver your final powerful sentences, you feel the familiar tension in your gut? You've said what you needed to say, but have you said too much? Have you offended the wrong person? Or simply misinterpreted the moral pulse of the city? The forum may roar with applause or jeers, but the real judgment, the one that could truly end your public life, might only be whispered in the halls of the censor's office. A silent, chilling sentence hanging in the Roman air. You've finally reached the crescendo, the dramatic conclusion of your oration. Your voice, though hoarse, rings out across the forum. You deliver your final, carefully crafted phrases, aiming for that perfect blend of pathos and logic that will sway the crowd and seal your victory. Then, you step back, a physical release of tension, and endure the agonizing, immediate aftermath cheers or jeers. This is the moment of truth, where public judgment is swift, merciless, and utterly brutally honest. The immediate reaction of the crowd is a wave that washes over you, a sudden, overwhelming surge of sound and emotion. It's either a thunderous roar of applause, a collective exhalation of approval, accompanied by shouts of bravo or optime, excellent, or conversely, it's a chilling wave of silence, followed by scattered boos, hisses, or the dreaded slow, rhythmic stomp of feet that signals widespread disapproval. There's no hiding from it, no delaying the inevitable. The judgment is instant, and it's absolute. If it's applause, a surge of exhilarating relief washes over you, momentarily chasing away the exhaustion. Your body, previously tense and rigid, relaxes a fraction. You allow yourself a small, dignified nod, a subtle acknowledgement of their approval. This is the reward for all the grueling training, all the sleepless nights, all the terror. This is what you live for the validation of the Roman people, the sweet taste of public triumph. You've earned their favor, at least for now. But if it's jeers, the silence that follows your final words is deafening, more crushing than any shout. Then, as the scattered boos begin to rise, a cold dread fills your stomach. Your meticulously crafted arguments, your powerful gestures, your very credibility, all feel as though they are crumbling to dust around you. The public has spoken, and they have rejected you. Your face, trained to convey gravitas, struggles to maintain composure, to hide the humiliation that burns within you. Every fiber of your being wants to shrink away, to disappear into the throng. The crowd's judgment wasn't always logical. It could be swayed by factors completely unrelated to your speech, their mood that day. A recent famine, a popular politician's personal animosity towards you, or even just the heat. You might deliver a brilliant, unassailable argument, only to be met with indifference because the people were more concerned with the upcoming gladiator games. Conversely, a mediocre speech could be met with wild enthusiasm if it tapped into a simmering popular sentiment. This capriciousness made the orator's life a constant gamble, a roll of the dice with fate. Beyond the initial roar, the judgment continued in more subtle ways. As you descend from the rostra, people will approach you. Your supporters will offer congratulations, their words warm and encouraging. Your rivals, however, might offer feigned sympathy, or even outright snide remarks, their eyes glinting with malicious pleasure. You might overhear whispers in the crowd, dissecting your performance, highlighting your perceived weaknesses. Did you hear how his voice cracked? That argument about the grain supply was utterly unconvincing. Every overheard comment, every sidelong glance, contributes to the immediate assessment of your success or failure. The outcome of your speech could have immediate and far-reaching consequences. A successful oration could propel your political career, earn you a coveted public office, or secure a crucial legal victory. It could elevate your family's standing and bring you new clients and patrons. Your name might be on everyone's lips, lauded in the taverns and whispered in the Senate. This was the lifeblood of Roman public figures, their currency of power and influence. But a disastrous speech could have the opposite effect. It could stall your political ambitions, lose you a major legal case, or even lead to a loss of patronage and social standing. Public humiliation in the forum was a stain that was hard to wash away. It could take years, if ever, to recover your reputation. The Roman public was notoriously unforgiving of perceived weakness or failure, especially in their leaders and representatives. It's like having your worst public speaking nightmare play out in front of the entire world, and then having it broadcast on every news channel for the next month. One common historical truth is that Roman politicians often relied on kontaiones, informal public assemblies where they would address the people, as a way to gauge public opinion and rally support, even before formal legislative or judicial proceedings. These events were essentially live focus groups, where orators could test arguments and feel the pulse of the crowd, making the immediate feedback after a formal speech all the more critical as a measure of popular sentiment. A lesser-known detail about the aftermath of a speech is the practice of libelli, or acta diurna. These were early forms of public notices or daily gazettes, sometimes summarizing public speeches or events. While not immediate, a poor performance in the forum might find its way into these public records, perpetuating the humiliation and making it a matter of public record, adding a layer of enduring shame to the immediate feedback. Historians still debate the true long-term impact of individual speeches on Roman political outcomes. While some argue that a single powerful oration could decisively swing public opinion and alter the course of events, others contend that such moments were often the culmination of long-term political maneuvering, client relationships, and underlying societal trends, with the speech merely serving as a dramatic public articulation of already existing forces. The academic discussion often explores the interplay between individual rhetorical genius and the broader structural forces of Roman politics. So, as you step down from the rostra, the roar of the crowd, whether of triumph or condemnation, slowly begins to recede. The physical sensation of the stone beneath your feet, grounding you in the reality of what just transpired. The forum continues its chaotic life around you, but for you, the moment of judgment hangs heavy in the air. You've laid yourself bare, risked everything on the power of your words, and now you must live with the immediate, undeniable consequences of the Roman people's brutal, honest verdict. You've delivered your oration, faced the judgment of the crowd, and felt the immediate rush of triumph or the sting of defeat. But as the echoes of the forum fade and the dust settles, a deeper, more profound realization emerges: the fragile legacy and the fading voice. The life of a Roman orator, while filled with moments of dazzling brilliance, was ultimately one of relentless demands, fleeting fame, and a constant struggle against oblivion. Imagine the sheer volume of words uttered in the Roman forum over centuries. Millions upon millions of speeches, debates, eulogies, and condemnations. Yet only a tiny fraction of these words have survived to reach us. The vast majority of Roman orators, even those who were celebrated in their time, have been swallowed by the sands of history. Their voices are silent, their arguments forgotten. This knowledge, even if unspoken, must have weighed heavily on those who dedicated their lives to the spoken word. Your moment of glory on the rostra, so intense and all-consuming, was incredibly ephemeral. The life of an orator was not just about delivering speeches, it was a perpetual cycle of preparation, performance, and political maneuvering. You were constantly reading, writing, rehearsing, networking, and engaging in the cutthroat world of Roman politics and law. The demands on your time, your intellect, and your energy were relentless. There was no true off-season. Reputations had to be constantly maintained. alliances forged, and rivals countered. This constant pressure must have led to immense stress, exhaustion, and a pervasive sense of never being truly at rest. Consider the physical toll over a lifetime. Years of straining your voice, standing for hours, enduring the elements, and coping with chronic anxiety would inevitably take their toll. Many prominent Roman orators, despite their public power, likely suffered from chronic ailments related to their demanding profession, vocal cord damage, nervous complaints, and digestive issues. The image of the powerful orator often masked a body pushed to its absolute limits. And then there's the fickle nature of Roman fame. One day you could be lauded as the savior of the Republic. The next, a poorly chosen phrase or a shift in political winds could see you ostracized, exiled, or even worse. The public memory was short and often swayed by the latest scandal or the most charismatic new voice. Cicero, perhaps the greatest Roman orator, ultimately met a violent end, his words unable to protect him from political enemies. His life is a stark reminder that even the most celebrated voice could be silenced forever. Your legacy was not guaranteed. It had to be continually fought for, reinforced with every public appearance. The survival of your words depended largely on whether they were recorded and preserved. While some prominent speeches were written down and circulated as published works like Cicero's orations, this was not a universal practice. Many impactful speeches were lost to time, remembered only by those who heard them or through fleeting references in other texts. The orator's art was primarily an oral one, and its power was in the moment, making its preservation a deliberate, often secondary act. This impermanence fostered a unique relationship with one's craft. You poured your heart and soul into each oration, knowing that its greatest impact would be fleeting. The true measure of success wasn't always future fame, but the immediate effect on the crowd, the swaying of a jury, the passing of a law. The legacy was in the action, not necessarily in the enduring text. It's like being an incredibly famous pop star who never releases any of their music. Brilliant in the moment, but nothing to leave behind. One common historical truth that sheds light on this ephemeral nature is the Roman emphasis on action and civic duty over abstract intellectual pursuits or personal fame. While oratory was a respected art, it was primarily a means to an end service to the Republic, advancement of one's career or defense of one's clients. The words themselves were instruments, not necessarily works of art to be preserved for eternity, which contrasts with later classical periods that valued texts for their own sake. A lesser-known detail is the practice of recitations, public readings of one's own literary works or speeches to a select audience. While this might seem like a way to preserve words, it was also a social event, a performance in itself, highlighting the Roman preference for oral delivery even for written works. It served as a form of publication before the widespread availability of books, but still relied on the speaker's continued presence and performance. Historians still actively debate the true stylistic differences between a Roman orator's delivered speech and the published version that survives today. Some argue that the written versions were often refined and polished, losing some of the spontaneity, interjections, and raw energy of the live performance. Others contend that Roman orators meticulously crafted their speeches in advance, so the written version is largely faithful to what was spoken. The academic discussion often grapples with the inherent limitations of reconstructing an oral culture from its surviving written fragments, leaving much of the true, terrible experience of live performance forever to our imagination. So, as the Roman sun finally sets, casting long shadows across the silent, emptying forum, you realize the profound weight of your chosen path. Your voice, once so powerful and commanding, will eventually fade. Your words lost to the relentless march of time. Yet, for a brief, glorious moment, you stood on the rostra, a conduit for ideas, a master of persuasion, and a living embodiment of Rome's unique, demanding, and ultimately fleeting oratorical spirit. And in that moment, for better or worse, You were truly alive. The dim glow of the night lamp now fills the air, gently dispelling the last images of the chaotic Roman Forum. The noise of the crowd, the strong scent of the ancient city, and the sheer tension of standing before thousands of people all fade away, leaving only the silence of the night. You feel your body sink deeper into the soft mattress, a pleasant contrast to the hard stone platform you had imagined. The strong words, the applause, the angry boos are now just distant sounds, fading into the soft whisper of the wind outside the window. Let your mind wander over the final images, the heroic efforts of the ancient orators, and realize the peace of this very moment.